So here I am in the shack having a quiet cuddle with my Sashiko machine. If you've never seen one before, it is quite an amazing machine because it's the only one in the world that can truly emulate a hand stitch. And it makes a stitch and it makes a gap between the stitches. You can only come vaguely close to this on an ordinary machine by using an invisible thread in the upper looper and then adjusting the tension to pull the thread through from the bobbin. In this instance, we have no thread on top. There is a spool pin up here in order to wind the bobbin. This is not in use to thread the needle. All of the thread comes from the bobbin, and we have a spectacularly different type of needle setup on here which pulls the thread up from the bobbin in able to use it. We can adjust on this side the length of the stitch, and we can adjust the length of the gap between the stitches. Now they both go from 2 to 5 millimeters and they work independently of one another, so you can adjust them to suit yourself. Over here we have the ability to make the machine, it's flashing because I've got the foot up. So if I put the foot down, when that light is blue, the top light is lit, it means that the needle will stop in the up position. When I press it, it changes to green and the needle will now stop in the down position. However, when the needle goes down, the foot comes up. Let me do that with the other finger, you might be able to see. The foot comes up and it allows you to pivot your fabric. The bottom setting, if I hold and press, the bottom setting is for when you want to change your bobbin. We have on the far side is a dial which adjusts the height at which the foot hops up when you're stitching. On the top here, and I have to say this very carefully, is the presser foot pressure. Bobbin winder here, and that basically is it. It is also designed, it has 2 screw holes on the plate here so that you can use all kinds of industrial attachments. I actually find a bias binder works extremely well with this machine. So you can see the orange light flashing up here on the machine. It's telling me that the foot is up. If I now put the foot down, it changes to the top blue light, which indicates that it will stop with the needle up. Now let me just take a few minutes to show you exactly how this machine works and how the needle and the latch work on it. So if I just zoom in so you can see the needle more closely. The needle has an eye which is open at the front, and that eye is covered by this here. This is the latch which opens and closes the needle in order to collect the thread from underneath. So I'm just going to turn the balance wheel and you will see the needle go down. It collects the thread from underneath. It's temporarily held on this little bar here. The needle goes down again. The latch this time opens and it drops the thread, and the feed dogs now carry the fabric forwards to make the gap between the stitches. I currently got it set for 2 millimeters stitch and 2 millimeters space, but if I make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use the foot pedal, you can see how it works. Now as you see, the needle stops in the up position. If I now press that button again on the front, just a bit further, there we go. Press the button, the light turns to green. The needle has stopped in the down position. When that light is green, it is telling me that there is no thread in the needle. And according to what I have set the side dial on, it's currently set on 2. As you can see, it means that the foot has come up and I can pivot. Now when the front light is green, there's no thread in the needle, so I can pivot up to 90 degrees. And it will happily continue to stitch. When that light is orange, it means that there is thread in the needle. So it's advisable to pivot gently. You won't see much difference on the top, but underneath, if you want it to be spot on perfect underneath, you need to turn when the light is green. Often, in order to match a pattern or something, I will just reduce the stitch length in order to get my needle to drop in exactly the right place. However, I can just tap once on the foot pedal and it will advance half a stitch like so. The light is now green and I can pivot again. Top speed, pretty impressive. Let me zoom in a bit more so you can see. When you want to do curves, as you see, it will actually take quite sharp curves without any issues whatsoever. It needs to be stated though that this is not free motion, because all the time it is relying on those feed dogs underneath to move the fabric. So you have the freedom of that foot lifting, so you can pivot quite easily and you can still follow fairly complicated patterns without any problems whatsoever. If you want to stop in one position and maybe move to somewhere else on the fabric, simply press that button again. You can then raise the foot, slide the fabric sideways like so, reposition it and carry on stitching. And that will then leave you, let me just show you how to stop. So again, with the needle set in the up position, I can raise the foot, slide it sideways, tuck it into that little gap there. There is a cutter, and you see there is my stitching, absolutely spot on, perfect. And if I turn it over, there you can see the jump stitch where I moved from one part to the other. And obviously all I need to do is just clip that. If you want, you can put a little dab of fray check on each of those open ends. That will hold it in place because this stitching will not come undone. This is not a chain stitch. Thought I might give you a few ideas as to what you can do with your Sashiko machine. Now, I have downloaded a lot of designs from the internet. So I found all kinds of traditional Sashiko designs and I've just printed them off. And this is just a small lap quilt that I've made. All of the designs came just from Googling Sashiko designs really. And then basically with this machine, you'll find it's much easier if you do quilt as you go. Because it's not free motion, you can't do the sideways and the back and forth intricate designs that you can do with a free motion stitch. However, with this one, if you just do each panel at a time, you'll find that you've got lots of opportunity to move that fabric around and create some interesting designs. This one in actual fact has been joined. This is an overlock stitch using a woolly nylon. It's a 4-thread overlock with woolly nylon in both loopers, and that just gives you that rather interesting raised seam effect, so the seams are on the right side. And the binding was done using a Babylock machine that has the wave facility. So that's a Babylock overlocker with the waves facility built in. And here is another one I made earlier. Once again, I downloaded some designs from the internet, just used a chalk pencil to trace out those designs, and I've done each piece separately, each block separately, and quilted them together afterwards. And I just knocked the screwdriver on the floor, but we'll ignore that. Just wanted to show you a few different types of thread that we can use in the Sashiko machine. So all I've done here is to just draw random paisley type shapes and then fill them in with a variety of different stitch patterns. The first one I've used here is the lime green. You saw me using that earlier. This is a Madeira thread. It's frosted matte. It's a 40 weight polyester. There it is. And the way to tell if your thread is going to work well on the machine is to give it a good pull, and if it doesn't break, then it's going to be fine. Polyester is good when you get on to something like a rayon. You'll find a rayon is the type of thread that you would have in an embroidery machine, and you will often find that actually that is too fragile, breaks too easily. I love to use quilting weight cottons. This is Madeira Katona. This is a 30 weight, so it's slightly thicker than the one before, and this is what we've used here. So this is the brownie colour variegated. Don't forget, of course, that each of these stitches on the top is actually double thread. So even if your thread is a 30 weight, you've got double thickness on top, which will give it extra emphasis. Be aware that some cotton threads, some cheaper cotton threads, have quite a short staple fibre, so they will break more easily. So always do that little test, just pull them to see how strong they are. This is the one I used in the middle. So again, this is a variegated thread. This is Metler's Polysheen Multi. Again, a polyester. This one has a little bit more sheen to it than the first polyester, which was a matte. So when you start looking at all the various options, there's really a great deal of variety out there for you to play with. The thing to remember, we are recommended to work with nothing thicker than a 30 weight, and that is purely because of the size of the eye of the needle. Although it may behave beautifully when you're actually working with a really thick thread, as soon as you start to try and go round corners or curves, you'll find that any thicker thread will have a tendency to leap out of the eye of the needle. If that happens, it's then inclined to break the little latch that opens and closes that eye. So now I'm going to show you how to thread the machine up. Obviously there's only the bobbin to thread, and in order to do that I press the button on the front, hold it until the bottom light comes on, and that then puts this bobbin in the correct position for us to remove the case and rethread. So there is my bobbin, and the difference with this is that we have on one side a little brush. Mine's getting a little bit tatty now, but it still does the job perfectly well. And on the other side we have here a double set of prongs with an eye through both of them, and that is the magic. That's where it all happens, because the needle goes between those two prongs, and that is where it collects the thread from. So in order to put my bobbin in, I have to lay it in that way, so the bobbin is pulling clockwise, and then slide it into the slot in the normal way, and then I'm just going to twizzle those 2 threads. Okay, doesn't want to play. Twizzle those 2 threads, thank you, now I've overdone it. There, that's what I wanted. And poke that thread through the 2 eyes. And now we put the prongs at the bottom. Let me find something to point with, because there is a little yellow dot and I have to line up the prongs of the bobbin with that little yellow dot. You'll know when it's gone in because you'll feel and hear it click. Okay, so you couldn't hear it then. That's typical. Now, let's just zoom out a little bit. I'm holding this thread gently. I turn the wheel towards me. And the thread is collected in the needle. So I now pull that thread through and I do it a second time. So I hold the thread again, turn the balance wheel towards me, and now that thread is collected by this thing here, which is the tension arm. So once the thread is on that tension arm, I can just close the side and put it into that slot where it will be held in place. If you pull harder, it will cut it. And now we're ready to sew. So the one thing I have yet to show you is the fact that the Sashiko 2 machine will actually do a kind of couching. You see here I've used different types of fibres. I have a knitting wool here. This is a 4-ply knitting wool which I've used double. This is a very soft ribbon, and this one is a slightly harsher ribbon, so as you see you tend to lose some of the definition in the shape when the ribbon is a little bit harder. So let me show you how to set up for this. I've drawn lines on the denim and I'm just going to line it up with the lines on the foot and set the foot down. Now that's holding it in position. If I now double press, can you see how the light now is flashing? That means it will only progress 1 stitch at a time. That is 1 stitch and 1 gap. So I'm going to just wrap the wool around the back of that needle, and then I'm going to cross it over in front. I don't actually need my setting to be as high as 3, so I'm going to change the height to 2, and then now every time I put my foot on the foot pedal it will just advance 1 stitch at a time. So you see I've got 2 lots of the wool. I'm using it doubled and I'm just wrapping it round each time. And every time I put my foot on the pedal, it just moves forward 1 stitch and 1 gap. Of course, depending on the thickness of the ribbon or wool that you're working on, you can adjust the length of your stitch. Currently set on 3.5. Look what happens if I set it to maybe 4. It's now less inclined to stab the wool as it goes over, so hopefully that will give me a cleaner stitch as it progresses. So that is one method. I'm now going to wrap the wool twice So I've got both strands on the same side. There's a line on the front of the foot, so I'm lining that up with the chalk mark on my fabric. So now again I press my foot onto the foot pedal, and now we're just going to weave back and forth. There are probably dozens and dozens of methods of doing this kind of couching, many of which I haven't yet discovered, but it is enormous fun just playing with the fibres and almost like weaving as you weave in and out. And then when you want to finish, you press the button, the needle goes up, you can now pull it sideways, finish off like so, and there's my woven sample. I bet you could have hours and hours of fun messing around with different wools and ribbons and threads and all sorts with this. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a remark in the comments. I hope you enjoy your Sashiko machine. There is nothing like it in the world, and it's basically given me hours and hours of fun. Thank you for watching.